Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley.
And today we are joined by mystical life coach Shannon Bennett, everybody.
Welcome.
All the way from New Zealand.
All the way.
Yeah, all the way. So can't wait to visit you there. I hope you'll have us. Shannon, I love your topic today. I think this is something that every single being on the planet can definitely agree with, that everybody runs this in some shape, way, or form. The voice of fear, which I really love. And I feel like there's a lot that we can probably go into, but I'd love to know a little bit about, why this, you chose this topic and what was it that really was like, this is the one.
Yeah. Well, hello, and thank you for having me. The voice of fear has been probably the most prevalent aspect of my life, especially beginning the work with Masters of Self University. So that's why I want to talk about it, because it's probably the most that I could talk about something.
Yeah.
When I first started this journey, I found it really, really hard to speak. And I've always found it hard to speak, particularly in front of large groups of people. But yeah, that was one thing that I really knew that I needed to heal in order to be able to fulfill my purpose and my journey moving forward. I need to speak. So I've really been investigating the different ways and the different voices, which is not only words, right, of fear, it's sensations in the body as well. So yeah, for me, it's just been a really huge and confronting and debilitating aspect of my journey thus far.
Yeah. So you've always obviously known this about yourself, but was it just blatant during the program did it show up in class a lot? Like, cause the three of us did a 6-month mystical life coach certification program. So did you notice it there more than ever, or like you always knew that it existed?
I knew it became very obvious in that class. I would really struggle to reach forward and click the unmute button and say what I needed to say. Like my whole body would go into shaking and my heart would be in my throat and I would feel just overwhelmed with fear of going to speak. And so I really started to investigate that of like, why do I feel like I'm about to die and I'm just speaking?
Well, that's the feeling that will come up when you go to kind of like share. Are you feeling that right now, sharing on this podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you are.
Listen, it's listened. My God, it's listened.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. This is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. As you're speaking, I can feel that I've never experienced it on a level that you're experiencing, because what you're saying is when you're about to speak, you feel like you want to die. So for me, it's always been like, I'm just nervous because I'm afraid like if I'm going to mess up, but it's never been to the extent of, I think I'm going to die. So that's really interesting.
Right. And it sounds so dramatic, but that's literally what it is. It's that entire nervous system response of something very bad is about to happen because I am speaking. And I'm not just speaking, about light topics or whatever. Our classes were always deep and they were vulnerable and they were places that you really had to go to the depths of yourself and your being and speak about it. And so I think that is what is probably the biggest trigger, is that I'm about to speak my truth and I am going to die. Something in there, it's like so debilitating, and it's a massive blockage. And I think I've just recognized, there's often people say where your biggest challenges is where your goal is or where your learning is.
Yeah.
And that has been my biggest challenge. So I'm like, okay, this is where I'm meant to develop the most. This is where I'm really meant to utilize and open up and use the voice.
Yeah, it's one of the main, whatever we struggle with is normally one of the main ways we're supposed to serve. Once we overcome, we go through that hero's journey, we overcome the fear. And so thank you so much for facing your fear and for coming on this podcast today to talk to us about this, because I remember, like, before I got really comfortable at doing this, it's really nerve-wracking to get in front of a camera and to open up and to use your voice. And then not only that, is as you speak about, it's like it's the content of what we're also speaking about, because it's about the deepest vulnerabilities we have. It's about things that we really hold true to ourselves, and that puts you at a place of risk of being made to feel wrong, insecure, people to judge you, shame you, pull you down. And it's a very challenging place to be. So thank you. And I honor your courage for stepping up and using that voice and facing the fear.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that you bring in a really important word of risk, because I think that's so closely linked to our survival programming. If we put ourselves out on a limb and we go into risk, then we are really putting everything that we've created egoically on the line. And that's why it feels so terrifying. I think it is a death of sorts when we start to speak. So yeah, it's been a wild ride. But I think the voice of fear, for me, it doesn't just express in words in my mind, it expresses so much in my body. So it's really like I said, nervous system, heart rate goes crazy, palms are sweaty. And then the other ways that the voices of fear shows up too is silence. Because if I just stay silent, there's no opportunity for anyone to degrade or make me wrong or that sort of thing too. So it's really fascinating watching how fear shows up in all these different ways.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what your journeys looked like with, it feels like you haven't 100% overcame it, because it's still, I'm sure it's a very deep wound, like most of ours, like, it's going to take a minute, but where I can feel you've gone with it, you've done a lot of work with it. Right. And not only that, but I see it in the way that you show up in like all the forums that we do and things like that. And even on this podcast. So can you talk a little bit about what the journeys looked like for you and like the work you've done with it?
Yeah, sure. So when I first began, it was in the classes, in the calls, being afraid to click unmute and start speaking. So that was the initial, what it first looked like. And then I realized that was obviously a place of challenge for me. So I would actively find places where I had to speak. And then because that's the trigger, right? And that's the point of entry into healing it. It was like, oh, okay, I can actually do this proactively, not reactively. So I would proactively try and trigger myself, and I would do that through social media posts or speaking things, in my workplace or with my family, and just practicing, even though I didn't feel completely comfortable doing it. And then I started to notice how I was speaking, and that I would have an intonation at the end of my sentences. So it would make it sound like I wasn't sure and I wasn't completely committed to what I was saying. So I started to really investigate the nuances in what I was saying and how I was speaking. And a lot of that comes into right? And and all of those surrounding words, because I'm not fully in my confidence and speaking purely from my heart up into my throat and out into the world. It's like my mind is still trying to formulate how to perfectly speak. And so now it just feels like I'm practicing over and over and over to get that movement fluid and moving from my heart through my throat into the world, as opposed to this kind of jagged sort of awkward almost way of speaking.
When a few months ago this year, I worked through a similar wound where I had to speak up. It was in one of our coaching forums, and I could see something and I had to speak up, but there was all this fear that if I spoke up, everyone was gonna make me feel wrong for saying either the right thing or the wrong thing. It felt like it didn't matter what the outcome was going to be. Something bad was going to happen if I used my voice. And for me, when I did the work after that to go in and heal, it was like all this lack of safety, lack of security that was in there. And a lot of it related to being at school and realizing when I was young that I had to kind of like dim my light and change the way that I am to conform. That was the word that kept on coming through, was like I had to conform to what everybody else what needed and wanted me to be. And if I didn't, I risked being the one being put on the chopping block, being judged, shamed, made feel wrong, made feel inferior, cast out on the side. And then that would activate all of my wounds of not being accepted and not being kind of like one of the team, and which I'm sure would have, when I was younger, would have triggered a bunch of other stuff. So I really didn't want that. So I had to learn from a young age, don't rock the boat. Don't speak up about what it is you see. Shut all that down, because whatever it is that you say, they're not going to like it. And doesn't matter whether or not it's true or not, they're not going to like it. So keep your mouth closed. Is that I would just love to hear your, like, where your wounding kind of like stem from, if you're willing to share on that kind of like page.
Yeah, I've located a few different wounds around it. So the first one being, there's 4 of them that come to my mind. The first one being, I was in a conversation with my family, and then I had a sibling tell me to shut up, like really harshly and really out of the blue. And I remember just feeling like awful, like completely cut down. And I just shut up. And then from that moment, I was like, wow, I've got to like really not say things like that, you know. And I was speaking a truth. I was trying to stand up for somebody in this situation. So that was one of them. Another one was my younger brother. He actually had both of his hands on my throat when we were young, and he kind of held me in that position. And I remember working through a trigger and then getting to that place, and completely, I had no recollection of it, but I remembered it vividly once I had gone into the trigger. So he had both hands on my throat, and I couldn't speak, right? I couldn't say anything to save myself. So of course that nervous system function kicked in, and I felt afraid because I couldn't tell him to stop. Another one was a speech that I did at school, and it was for a leadership role, and I messed up my cue cards and I got it all wrong, and I just felt this immense shame, like immense shame. I had just, made a total fool of myself in front of hundreds of people. And then the final one was, it was a past life experience. And that was something that was like really, really, really deep and painful to look at as well, because I was killed for saying something.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That was like, keep going.
Yeah, no, that was like, I'm going to go into full detail because this is where I think that I've always been afraid to share these experiences too, because they're very quote unquote mystical or not normal, right, in this kind of day and age. So the experience that I had was I was in a hot tub of water, and I was being boiled alive because of what I had said. Like, it was gnarly to go into that and really like feel the heat and the skin and everything like that. That was a big experience to go into and feel that fully. So
wow. And can you, go ahead.
No, just a lot of unraveling, right? And there's so many layers to it. So I was like determined to find all of the different wounds, but it feels like a lot has shifted.
Wow. And this is something that I see with a lot of our colleagues who move through some of this big stuff. And like, this is a big one of like the fear of voicing anything, of speaking. And like a lot of them have gone into past life experiences where they've been killed, they've been hung, they've been burned, they've been all these things, which is why it's showing up in this life in this way. And so was it through this work that you reached that past life experience?
Absolutely. There was no other way, right? Like, this teaches you how to go into the very specifics of it and trust exactly what you are sensing and feeling when you go that trigger. There's no more questioning of like, am I making this up? Because you can't. Like, it opens up to you in a way that is so profound, and you're like, that has to be it.
Yeah.
And coming from a completely soul heart place, nothing to do with the mind telling stories about it. It's just like, whoa, I see this completely and clearly.
Beautiful. Yeah, right before this, I had a session with somebody that it went into a past life. And that's as soon as you started speaking about this, I was like, oh, this is a past life. I just didn't know if you were going to take it there. And obviously it did. So, and I just want all the listeners to understand everything that's showing up in your life right now, that's for you. And it might be linked to a past life and it might not be. And it doesn't really matter, because the important part is that it's showing up now. If we can, as Shannon's explained, do the work and heal in the now, and it opens up into the past life, amazing. Now you have a better awareness of what it is that you're trying to heal. But some of us, like for me, example, I've never had anything go into the past life, but I know that I'm healing stuff from my past lives, of course, because it's all that idol thing, like everything happens now. It's all happening now. If it's showing up, if you're being triggered, it might be from a past life. It might not be, but it's showing up. So it needs your love. It needs your healing. And I think before I found this work, I was like, I wonder if I need to do past life regressions. And they're all wonderful. They're amazing. The beauty of this work is, if there's something in your past life that needs your love and attention, you'll find it in this work. And
in this life.
Yeah. And, this is a beautiful case point example of like, you probably didn't go in with the intention of like, oh, this is from my past life and I need to figure all of this out. Although hearing you talk about it, like a fear of a woman speaking up, immediately I'm like, oh yeah, this is probably something that's been, passed on, well, brought with you lifetime to lifetime. And then you had these experiences with your sibling, your brother in the leadership role to reflect these triggers, this energy that's carrying in there. And this is how it manifests in this lifetime. And then for you, as you're healing it, I'm curious, did the past life come, was that like the final layer or the last layer that you've healed with this? Or did it go in obviously it's healing, so there's no like time order. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can't remember, to be honest. I cannot remember. I think the first one was the brother situation, and then I feel like it was the past life. It was bits and pieces, and they came and went as well, as they do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up in like, well, I have to remember. And it's like, no, just work with the energy that's right here. That's all it is. That's what needs transforming. It's not about remembering this and hanging on to that and reliving that. It's like, no, it's here. And if, is there such things as past lives? Like it's all happening simultaneously at once. So it's like, as you're healing, it's just rippling into all these other lives and timelines and things that are happening now. So and Shan, like I'd love to hear your take. Like, so this, when you talk about the voice of fear, right? I can feel the depth of it. Like I can feel like how deep it is, right? And so even when you're giving these examples, right, with the brother or someone telling you to shut up, right? It's like those things obviously would trigger that, but like the depth of that, when you said the past life stuff, I was like, there's the depth. Like that's where it comes from, because all of these other things are like, but I couldn't feel the depth of it until you went there. I was like, okay, so it's so deep. And then these are coming to bring that back up to you. But yeah, for anybody out there who's like, why is this one so crazy? Like we had Trey Laura once and she was like, I've got this program of like unworthiness. And she's like, and I've healed a lot of it. I don't know where it's come from. And then a past life came up and I was like, there's that depth. There's how deep it goes. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and if something's being triggered, right, that is the memory.
Yeah.
So whether or not I think because we've lived in such a society that's attached to mind and thinking, it's like, well, the only memory is a visual memory in my brain. And it's like, no, that's a memory. The nervous system, when it's freaking out, that's an energetic memory. The energy that you feel of the fear and my fear for safety and my survival, that's a memory. And then obviously the mental memories, but we get so attached to wanting to remember.
Yeah.
I remember I had a healing with Rachel Fiori, and it was really weird because I could feel all of the energy, but I had no idea what was happening. There was no visual memory at all, which is quite rare for me. Normally I do get the visual memory of when I was a kid. Had no idea what happened. Moved through the whole thing and asked her after, and thankfully she was psychic and was able to kind of like relay what was happening and what was there because she could see. And this is another way that our minds, when something are really painful, we shut that off and we don't want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes that memory can still be in us and it can pop up. Sorry, I just hit your head there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point too, right? Because it's not, a memory is an energy.
Yeah.
A visual is an energy. An emotion or a physical feeling in the body, they're all energies. And that's what the teachings are, is that everything is just an energy. So for me, and where I've got to at this moment is like, I've gotten to a point where I'm like, it doesn't matter where it's come from. Stop telling stories about it. Just feel it here.
Yeah.
And that is just like, it becomes so much more distinct and potent in actually being able to move it.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love what you said of doing all of these, instead of running away from the fear, you ran into the fear. So it's like showing up on social media, like having conversations or doing all of these things. Like, I think that's so beautiful. And that's what I do too, of like, I'm scared of this. I'm petrified. Let me go into it and let me just keep doing it over and over again and just alchemize what it brings up. And it's such a powerful way to like really, instead of waiting for it, you're like, no invitation, I'll just go and get it. So it's great. Yeah, it's great.
Totally.
Because on social media, you know, I think me and Danny, we always talk about like you're hilarious and you're deep and there's just so many goodies in there, right? But how has that been like for you to show up in social media in that way and share and speak?
Yeah, it's really good. And I really like doing it actually. And I never thought that I would be a person that enjoyed putting myself onto a platform and speaking about things, you know, where people could analyze and judge and predict all this stuff. But I just find it really fun, and I actually find the process of the creativity of it really fun too. So it's really interesting to see that it's not just I'm healing myself, I'm also opening up to all these other layers of who and what I actually am, which is so beautiful, and it creates this momentum of wanting to do it more. I would say that there are other wounds in there at the moment too, where it's kind of like this inconsistency and, different things of like, I want to use it when I want to use it, and I don't want to be consistent. Like I can feel that there's these other layers coming into it. But yeah, in terms of speaking and creating, I find it like so satisfying, which is really fun.
Totally. Yeah, something that I think I've struggled with on social media recently is like, you know, what I see, I think everybody has like different facets of the way that they artistically or creatively express. And like, for me, it's always just been my voice. And I had a video recently go viral and I was really vulnerable in the video. And there were a lot of beautiful comments and a lot of people who were like, I understand what you're saying. This is amazing. Like, this is like shining a light on something. And then the other half was just destroying me, like literally taking me and just pulling me into pieces, taking a shit on me, then pissing on me, then throwing me in the toilet. Like, just wow. Like, I had to constantly drop in, and he kept being like, stop reading the comments. I'm like, they're just popping up so much so fast, because when it goes viral, like everyone's commenting. And when
we're saying viral, 1 million views.
Yeah, in a week. So like what I experienced and what I went into was like, well, if you guys are going to shit on my vulnerability, then I don't want to share. which then is like, oh wait, if I listen to that program, then I would close completely, right? And that program was coming up strong of like, if you're giving a piece out and they're not taking and they're doing this, you don't need to share and you don't need to do this. Like, and I could feel energetically how I wanted to close myself, how I wanted to like hide, how I wanted to just delete everything, go F all of y'all, like I'm not doing any of this, right? And so that was a beautiful moment for me to see, oh, like there's all of these layers that I didn't know that were there. But it is hard when you put yourself out there and people are like, oh, okay, and then shoot you down. It is not, there's nothing about that that's easy.
I mean, if you're going out on social media and speaking up about anything that's meaningful, and it goes viral, it's gonna pull out all of the dark shit in everyone. The way that I kept on seeing it, it was like the brighter light that we shine and go out on social media and spread, the more darkness we illuminate, and the more darkness that comes to the light, which is seen in physical manifestation as seen in the comment section. And that was what was happening, is you were spreading so much light energetically with that video. It was reaching so many people's hearts that the polarity had to jump on, and all of the darkness starts to come out, and all of the trolls and all of the really sad people who are really wounded and hurt in this life, that just want to tear people down to make themselves feel better. How sad.
That is amazing, and absolutely right. Like, I think what happens when like you said, you put out this message of light and it reaches people's hearts. That's how energetics works. If we can't do that ourselves, if we don't feel powerful, we have to try and bring other people down. And that is the voice of fear. The voice of fear wants to bring everybody back down so that they don't have to change and evolve, because it's hard work. It's hard work, but it's so worth it. And I think we all feel that, right? Of like, I don't care anymore about what, like my human self does. And that's when we get pulled back into the triggers. But the higher self is like, I don't care. I'm going to say these things because they're coming from a place of like such strength and such heart that it just doesn't matter what comes back.
Definitely not easy.
I'd love to go in the direction of your humor, Shannon, because when I watch your videos on social media, they really engage me because they make me laugh.
So funny.
And when I watched your class, you moving through the MLC, I didn't pick up on any of that humor. I didn't feel any of that from you. And so when I started seeing you showing up on social media that way, I was like, oh, wow, there's like,
there she is,
all these different layers to her that I had no idea about. And wow, it was like so cool. And this is something that I've spoke about with Rachel Fiori, is she said, like, the more that you heal, you become funny, because now instead of your humor being about like, tearing people down, it's like it allows your soul to just be free. And like, I've had an experience before where I've heard the voice of Source, whatever, and it was joking. It was hilarious. It was making fun of me. It was using stuff that I'd said, and I was cracking up. So I know divinity is very funny. I know that it is. And so it's been really wonderful watching you share and make me laugh. But what has that been like as you found your voice of love to tap more into maybe like your comedic side and your funny side? Because
your messages are very deep, but you do it in such a way that it's so funny. So it's so easily digestible, but you're also like giving wisdom, it's like
beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
It's an amazing balance.
Oh, thank you. I think there's two sides to this coin. I think that if we are wanting to heal, you have to be of a lighter vibration, right? Like, you can't heal if you're down in those shame, guilt places. Like, you can be there and feel them for sure, but it's not easier. It's more, I think it actually heals when you're in joy. And that's what humor is. Humor brings joy. Humor brings laughter. Humor creates like this ease when we talk about really like dark, gritty, truthful stuff. And so I didn't actually know that it existed within me either. I mean,
Wow.
I kind of did, but it wasn't like when I started actually recording myself, I was like, oh, I'm meant to use this. Like, I'm not meant to just keep this to myself and like do my weird little things on my own. I'm meant to actually share that publicly. And I'm like, oh my God, that is terrifying. But it's fun. And like you said, if it's engaging, then I think like that's not my outcome. It's never my outcome. My outcome is like to have fun and enjoy the process. And I think creativity is very fun and playful in nature. So I've always been a really creatively centered person of like I just want to make stuff and I want to talk about things and I want to explore things and I'm curious. So I think humor is just a really beautiful vessel for all of that. And then the opposite side of that coin is I think sometimes I can hide behind it, but I've gone into that a couple of times and I'm like, no, this is actually part of who I am. So it's interesting navigating that and trying to utilize it in a more powerful way.
So have you found the more that you've healed, this kind of part of you is integrated more?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I'm healing something, it's almost like I can envision the little video that I'm going to create and how I'm going to speak. It's so funny. It's like it all wraps into one thing and I'm like, oh, this is all the same thing. Like when I'm healing, I am creating because I'm opening up all these other parts of myself that just have been so blocked. So it's fun. I would say it's fun if I could give it a word.
It's amazing.
The healing journey should be fun.
Yeah.
Life should be fun.
Oh, it should.
It should.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Doesn't mean it always is. Doesn't mean it always is.
Yeah.
But no,
Exactly.
it should be. If we can find the joy and the fun and the laughter in things, fantastic. Absolutely. I'm all for that. All for that.
And do you feel like now part of what you're here to do too is really use that voice? Like, do you see that coming more into fruition of like, oh, that's part of my soul mission is to really use my voice and be a voice?
Absolutely. But more so, I think it's more that I would like to help other people use their voice.
Yes.
Because I know exactly what it feels like to not be able to use it, right? So it's like we have to learn the opposite of what we are wanting to create in order to know that that's not what it is. So it's like, again, feeling into the frequency and the energy of like not being able to use the voice and how frustrating that is and how blocked that is. And then by feeling that is what opens up the voice and puts us in, that authentic expression. And so, for me, I just have this huge drive to be able to help other people because there's so much wisdom in every single person, but they just don't know it or they haven't figured out the expression of it to them personally yet. So I get so much satisfaction from helping people in general.
So, obviously, Ellie and I know this work and we know you. But for anyone listening who is maybe like, maybe I need to find my voice. What do you think for like the average person, just from your own experience, what do you think blocks most people?
Fear. And I think that it blocks us in different ways. So perhaps more than just thinking like, how can I unblock it, is actually recognizing the clues to why it's blocked. So a lot of the time it's when we are silent or it's when we are not opposing, but we have a different opinion to somebody that we care about or a group that we might, identify with or fit in with, and we consider them to be the people that we love and they love, we love them, they love us. And so when we have a different story or a different perspective to what they're saying, but we're not saying it, so silence, or agreeability as well, when we start to agree with people even though that's not what we actually think and feel. Avoidance, distraction is a big one. There's just so many ways that I think it shows up. So identifying the clues, and then also just feeling what it feels like when you know that you want to say something. How does it feel when you do go to speak? Are you articulating exactly what you want to say, or are you kind of talking at 30% and then fluffing it around with other things so that you hope that they're going to understand you? I think it's a very personal thing too, right? Because we're all programmed in a very specific way, but it is getting curious. And I think just getting curious about listening to yourself when others speak, but then listening to yourself when you're speaking, which is a tricky thing to do, because if you're focused on speaking and you're in fear, then it's hard to listen at the same time. But if you can cultivate that practice of, getting really, really self-aware, acutely self-aware, as you're speaking, that starts to give a lot of insight into what you're doing and why you're doing it.
And what has been the real big thing that's allowed you to find your voice?
I think my professional life is a big one, for sure. Working in places where there is a really like-minded community, but there's still a lot of people's programs and projections, and then being able to like know when to speak and when not to speak as well, because I think that's just as powerful. I think sometimes when it's coming from the right place, not speaking because you're triggered is actually very powerful. And so for me, it's been my workplace. It's been so much investigation. There's so many different relationships. There's so many different dynamics. There's as for context, I work as a retreat leader, so I work with guests who pay to come in and receive a certain something, and then I also work with people who, are my bosses and they run the show, and then I work with all these different kind of constructs of relationships. So it's such a good training ground for practicing and using my voice.
As someone who was in the luxury hospitality industry, I can 100. We clearly didn't do the same jobs, but I can 100% agree with you there. I mean, you get all these different walks of life. You've got to work as a team with, certain members. There are times when you see things that you do really need to speak up about, and the answer is always everyday life. The universe will bring you the triggers, right? That's the beauty of this work. You don't have to go out seeking and searching. You don't have to go to a cave. You don't have to give every possession up. You can just keep living your life.
Just walk down the street.
As you would as a normal human being, and just raise your awareness to realize what's coming up. Follow the steps, understand your programming, and learn to love your pain, and that's why I love this work so much, is because before I found MSU, I thought I was seriously, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, seriously debating, should I give everything up, go to India, and that's how I'm going to become healed and hopefully achieve enlightenment. Like, that's got to be the only way. And through this work, it's like, no, you can keep working in the hotel and get there that way.
Yep.
Just do this work long enough and you'll see all the triggers, you'll heal the programs, and then you go free to use your voice and find your own creative force within your own self, which is, I think, what we all should do as humans, and we all can do. And we came here to imagine, to create, to play, but then we got born into a world that was so brainwashed and so low and so pain-ridden and wounded and unconscious. And now we're on that hero's journey back to find our freedom again. And so we can be imaginative and creative in a loving way.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. I think the more that we heal, we get to tap into the creator is creative. It's imaginative, and the more that we heal, we get to experience that in our own little soul individual way, whatever that might be for each and every one of us. And that comes by doing the work, healing the programs, and transforming yourself from the inside out. Couldn't think of a better thing to be a part of. So thank you so much for coming on this podcast, Shannon, and talking to us about, finding your voice in the voice of fear.
Yeah.
Before you run away, well, not run away, but before you go back to your everyday life and work through your triggers, is there anything you want to say to our listeners, or to seal up this show?
If there's anything in life in general that you feel is tugging at you in any way, follow it. And the voice of fear will try to pull you out of it because the mind, wants to keep you there. But if you can feel something under the surface of that, follow it. And that's what I think is the most powerful thing that we can do, is keep following that thing, whatever it is, however it shows up for each person, whether it's a voice or an intuition or a feeling or a visual image, is like, just practice following it and see what happens. Because it's like this creative energy, and this creator is so, like you said, imaginative, and it's an experiment. And when you start to follow it, it's just mind-blowing what opens up.
Yeah, guys, let's do the work. So we can really step into who we really are and what we're really here to do. And, I've witnessed you in the past almost 2 years really grow. And it's just badass. Like, this is my life. I just get to watch people just grow, become more powerful, and find their voice and overcome so much. So thank you for this topic, Shannon. If anybody at home, if you want to work with Shannon, set up a free consultation with us at mastersofselfuniversity.com. Check out Rachel's book, Mason's Way, the 20 Universal Ways of Oneness. And we've also got a digital course that accompanies that. And subscribe, like, share. It really helps the podcast for us to keep going and do this for free. And subscribe. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.